Good morning and welcome to this webinar on using the 4C model to become a better line manager, to use the outputs from the WeThrive 4C model to improve the way you interact with staff and help them to get into a position where they're better able to do what you really want them to be able to do in their work. My name is Piers Bishop, one of the co-founders of WeThrive. Great pleasure to be with you today. Just a few housekeeping notes before we start. You are welcome, in fact encouraged, to throw questions at any point. There is a questions panel somewhere on the GoToWebinar control panel, and you can send questions to us live during the webinar, or actually you can just contact me at any time, Piers, P-I-E-R-S, at WeThrive.net. We're always keen to interact with people who are working with WeThrive because we want you to get the best possible value out of it for the company and of course for yourself as a manager. I guess you're watching this because you are given management responsibility. You're looking after people in the organization that you work in, and you want to be able to understand more about what's going on in those people's working lives so that you can do something to sort out difficulties and frustrations. That's exactly what this whole thing is about. We'd also like to know if there are other subjects actually that you're keen to hear more about from WeThrive, because we're always happy to run webinars on any subject that is useful to the people who use WeThrive. So be keen to hear about that as well. There's no fire drill planned for today, so if you do hear the fire alarm, either this place is on fire or your office is on fire, one way or the other. One of us will need to do something about it. But as I say, there's nothing planned, and let's hope that we carry on smoothly through the rest of the morning. Good morning to Zarina. Zarina's just sent a message in the question and answer box to say good morning, and I'd just like to say good morning again to you, and thank you for joining us. Thank you to everybody else who's joined us as well. Let's move straight on and take a look at why we're actually here. You may have done this already, but if you haven't, or even if you have actually, it's just worth taking 20 seconds to just disconnect from all the business of today. Take yourself away from the things that have happened so far this morning. Just let those go. Take yourself away, take your mind off the things you're going to have to do later on this morning when this webinar has finished. Just concentrate for a moment on floating back in your own mind to the best experience of work you've ever had. Just re-engage with what it feels like to be at work when work is really good. And just think about what that involves. What's going on? Why does work feel good when it's at its best? We've asked this same question of a very large number of people, and almost without exception, they say the same kind of things. And I'm guessing, though of course I'm always willing to be told I'm wrong, but I'm guessing the same sort of things will be floating up in your mind too. The kinds of things people mention when asked about the best experience of work they've ever had are things like these: having really clear expectations of what it is they're supposed to be doing, good communications to and fro between teams, between individuals in teams, between management and teams, understanding why you're doing things, feeling at one with the whole kind of ethos and the aims of the organization that you're working for, having the tools, feeling at the end of the day you've done something well, feeling part of something bigger than yourself, being acknowledged, being thanked, recognized for what you do, having a sense of control over the way you're working, and finding work meaningful. Those are the sort of things people tend to say. It's very rare, it's not unknown, but it's very rare for somebody to say, well, actually, I only go to work for the money. It's happened twice in my experience. Somebody said that, I'm just doing it for the money. And I think, or at least one of those was somebody whose mind was very focused on money, and the other one was somebody who really didn't like the job they were doing. So no surprise, I suppose, that what people really like about work is things to do with the flow, the interconnections, the interactions, and so on, because we are a social animal. We are primarily a being that likes to be with others, to do things that are interesting and useful. In fact, because that set of needs to be with other people doing things that are interesting and useful has been written into us through our evolution to make us do the things that enable us to make a success of our lives in the world before there was education and written knowledge and all the rest of it. The flip side of it, if we can't have those things, is quite unpleasant. If you're in a position where you can't feel in control of the way you're working, or you don't have what you need, or you're not communicating well, you're not in a good social group and all the rest of it, there's a whole series of consequences that come out of that that are really quite unpleasant. They affect the whole organism, the mind, the body, the way the brain works, and so on. So first of all, you get stress hormones being created. This changes the way your body works. You get blood flowing to different parts of the body because it's getting ready for action, for running or fighting primarily. So physical changes going on, but also mental changes. The way your brain works is different when you're under stress. And unfortunately, from the point of view of the organization, the employer, none of the consequences of that are very good. People literally become less intelligent. They're less likely to get on well with other people and be able to collaborate in a business way to solve problems, less likely to think of things that are new, less likely to be creative and good at problem solving anyway. People under a great deal of stress tend to start to think about preserving themselves. And in the business context, that could mean simply cutting yourself off, going into a corner, focusing really hard on the one thing you think you're supposed to be doing. Or it could mean forming silos with other people, places where you do feel safe, where you do feel you have control and all the rest of it. None of this is particularly productive for the organization. So the point of everything that we do at WeThrive is to help you as managers and the organization above that to be able to understand what is going on in people's internal experience of work so that we can know whether it is a good, happy, productive kind of experience they're having, or whether it is something stressful that needs work because needs attention, because otherwise it will be compromising productivity, collaboration, and all the rest of it. Now, we've made that argument so many times, it comes as second nature to us, but if that doesn't make sense to you, if you want to discuss that further, please get in touch with me, Piers at WeThrive.net, or you can, if you're watching the live version of this webinar, you can lob a question into the question box at any time. I'd really like to hear from you. As a manager working in a company that uses WeThrive, you may well get a login, a reporting users login sent to you, which allows you to go into the system and see what people have said about their working experience. And the first thing I'd like to say is that if some of the people who you're looking after are negative about their working experience, I urge you to treat that as useful information, as an opportunity to learn. It's natural for all of us to get defensive, to feel upset, maybe frightened, worried, certainly, when it suddenly becomes apparent that something we were doing, that we thought we were doing well, turns out not to be working as well as we thought it did. And it will happen occasionally to some people that they log in and find that some people in the organization have said things in a WeThrive survey that they didn't realize were going on. So don't feel threatened by that. This is useful. It's really useful. It's important. It's an opportunity to learn and grow for everybody concerned. The primary objective, obviously, will be to get to the source of the problem, to find out what's going on for the employees who've said whatever they've said, and to help them feel more positive about things and get work lined up for them so that it works better for them and for the people around them. But in the process of doing that, everybody learns, and it's a really, really useful process. Helps make the job of management easier. And that's, again, that's what we're all about here. So the whole WeThrive system runs on this model, the 4C model, and it's a psychological model of what human beings need, and I mean need at a biological level, in order to be happy and to be able to perform well. You will recognize, if you've done any reading at all, you recognize that there are multiple factors in common here with other psychological models of well-being and productivity and motivation at work. Everything overlaps, clearly. Maslow famously was the first person really to be so explicit about what human beings need, and he put it into a hierarchy. People have since pointed out there are a number of things that he didn't put into his model, which have become more obviously important through the advent of things like brain scanning. And also the whole idea of putting it into a hierarchy is not so useful at work, because actually any one of those things being missing will actually hobble somebody in terms of actually doing their job well and getting satisfaction out of it. So we just put it into a flat map of 16 domains that we think you can reliably say people need in order to be able to perform well at work. And if you can just get a handle on the underlying needs, the biological, psychological, social needs as a human being, everything else suddenly starts to make sense. Now we've mapped the needs of the human being at work into 4 areas, which is why it's called the 4C model. And they are, first of all, the cognitive area. This is what the team have in their heads, the picture they have of their work and how it's shared. Then there's the capability area. This is, on the face of it, simply practical. Do you have the stuff you need to do the work? But actually, of course, it's massively disabling if you don't, and it will interact with other areas of your job experience as well. So still hugely important. The connection area, this is about how the social needs of the human being are met at work. We are a social species. We don't exist in isolation. We can't be sane in isolation, which is why solitary confinement or being sent to Coventry as a school child is such a serious punishment. And then finally, the confidence area, what we call the confidence area. This is a group of feelings about work which we treat slightly differently from the first 3 areas, and I'll come on to explain why when we get to that area of the model. As I say, I hope all of this makes sense so far. Please throw something into the question box of the GoToWebinar control panel if any questions are coming up in your mind as we go through this. We'd love to hear from you, and as I say, you can also contact us directly as well. So let's start, if we may, at the beginning. Very good place to start, as somebody once famously said, with the cognitive area. And the first question that we ask people in a WeThrive survey, in the standard core question set, your organization may add to the core question set, but the core question set is always there because this covers the biopsychosocial needs of the human being. And it's massively important, more important than anybody realizes, actually. Partly because it's not conscious. You know, we're not always conscious of the things that are working or not working well in our own lives. You can become upset at work, at home, in a social situation, in a weekend activity or whatever, without realizing why it happened. But there will be a reason. And if you understand the underlying biopsychosocial needs, you'll be able to diagnose what the reason was and interact with it. And that's what we're trying to do in the workplace with WeThrive. So first of all, how much of the time do people have a solid sense of connection with the company that they're working for, the aims of the organization, and the needs of the end users? As I say, we're a social species. We really do function better when we do things as part of a group. And if you do something for somebody else, you feel satisfaction for it, they feel satisfaction from it, the relationship between the two of you grows, and that's the glue on which almost all of our social fabric is based. If I walk your dog, you'll come and feed my cat, and so on. And it's the same at work. And it's the same not only between individuals at work inside a team, but it's the same between the employee and the organization as well. Now, organizations understand this to a degree, and they'll come up with things like value statements, which they hope people's internal values will align with, and consequently they'll feel a real proper connection. There's something else in there too, though, which is whether you feel as an individual working for work that the people you're actually working for, whether they are the bosses of the organization or the end users, the customers, the people for whom your work is actually useful, if you feel a connection with them, then that's even more important. Because it's not an abstract thing like a value statement. It's a real human connection. I'm doing something that is actually going to be useful to somebody else. Now, not in every role is it possible to feel a strong connection. If you're in a back office position, if you're doing something in shared services where it's not really clear exactly who you're working for quite a lot of the time, that could be quite unmotivating. And it's important to the degree that it can be done for the manager to try and understand why that's happening, what it consists of, what might be done, if anything, to make it work better for the individuals involved. You can't fix everything. There are some problems that are just insoluble. There are some roles where that kind of solid connection is going to be extremely difficult to engineer. But to the degree that it can be done, and you might have to be inventive, imaginative, or you might just be able to realign slightly the way some internal company process, some piece of business as usual, like the newsletter or whatever, works in order to make it work a little bit better for the individuals. To the degree that it can be done, that will actually make people feel better. I did say that the question is framed in terms of time. How much of the time do you feel this or that. We actually ask all our questions in terms of time, because it's possible then to get a handle as an organization and as a manager on how much of the time people actually are fully available to you. If you agree that the amount of time you feel out of control, or you haven't got the resources you need or something, that's going to compromise the amount of time you're going to be able to be there being a productive individual, then I think you could see the value of asking all the questions in terms of time, because that gives us a handle on how much, what percentage of the individual is really truly available to the organization. Sarina asks, would feeling valued be included in the cognitive session? And my answer to that is not directly. Now, everything overlaps. These questions are broad and they all overlap with each other to some degree, but there is a specific question about whether you feel valued, which we'll come to a little bit later, just a few moments time when we get round to the third area of the model. So we will come to that in just a few minutes. Next, how much of the time do you personally understand exactly what you should be doing? Now, you'd think that personal performance item would be very high. You'd think everybody would know. They get onboarded after all. They've got a job specification. They get instructions, maybe even daily instructions from their management on what they should actually be doing. And yet, when you look at the results, you will be surprised, perhaps, I think, to find that there are some people, almost inevitably, some people in your team who, for a significant part of the day, don't feel they have a full grasp of what they should actually be doing in a given situation. And that clearly is going to cause frustration for them, uncertainty, unhappiness, worry, anxiety. It's going to cause inefficiency. It's going to cause rework. It's going to cause collisions between members of the team and so on. So to the degree that that is low, you need to understand why and to be able to talk to people about how to build a solution. Now, the third item, do we actually know what is in the head of the person next door to us? If I'm in a team and there are 4 of us and we are doing whatever, customer support, we're doing development, whatever we're doing, I really need to have the same picture of the work in hand as the person next door to me. But there are multiple reasons why that might not be the case. We might not have the same understanding of the words involved. It might not have been explained to us. It might have been assumed, because we'd had a similar role before, that we would have a proper understanding of all the processes that are happening in this organization. All of those might not be the case. Again, to the degree that you have misunderstandings between people, there's going to be inefficiency, potentially there's going to be difficulty. So we need to understand it, because knowledge is power. And once we understand what the areas of misunderstanding are, then we can actually build a solid plan to improve that area. If all's gone well so far, people know why they're there, they know what they're supposed to be doing, they think the people around them have the same picture, then the team ought to be able to cooperate. So we ask another question just to check that. How much of the time do you think the team are really cooperating with each other? And there tends to be a little fall down from item 2 to 3 to 4. And that's inevitable, I think. But if it's a significant drop off as you go round the model, then that's something that every manager would want to know about and to be able to do something about. So, second area, capability. On the face of it, as I said before, these are simply practical things, but actually they have huge implications. Do you have significant contextual information? I think the actual question is, how much of the time do you have all the necessary information that you need? Now, we're talking here about contextual information, daily information, briefings, product specifications, news relevant to the business, to the day, to the particular customer you're working for. Some companies are incredibly good at this. The flow of communications that goes with the work is just spot on. Some companies leave more to individual staff to try and work out. So people find themselves in the position of having to dig around and try and get the particular bits of information that they need in order to sort out individual bits of work. All of the white space between the top of the graph that shows you what the score is on this area is opportunity. If you can fill in the gaps, if you can make more information available so that people don't have to cope with uncertainty, you'll make them happier, you'll make them more efficient. Now, I know that's not always possible. As I say, no, you can't have perfection, you can't have everything 100% all the time. And there are some areas like development where you literally don't know. Product development, you literally don't know how something is going to come out, maybe. But to the degree that you can improve people's scores in that area, they will be happier, they'll be more creative too, more collaborative. How much of the time do you have the skills that you need to do the work? Now, you'd think people would rate themselves very highly on that. In fact, people are very honest, provided you've framed the exercise properly in the first place. If the company has said to people, we honestly, genuinely want to know what your opinion is of this area of your working life, and in return, there will be no recriminations. There's no hidden agenda here. We simply want to know where the opportunities are to help people have a better time and get more done. Then people will be very open and honest. And you'll find again, there will be some surprises in there. You will find people asking for help by saying that actually, maybe only half the time do I have all the necessary skills to do the things that you want me to do. Resources, well, I know nobody ever wants fewer resources. Everybody wants their own photocopier, stroke X-ray machine, stroke whatever else it might be. But where this scores particularly low, there might be a resourcing problem, or there might be teams that are not sharing properly, not able to schedule their work properly so they can work around each other and share resources. All of that is useful information. If everything's gone so well so far, then everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. They've got a shared picture. They've got the knowledge, skills, and resources. They ought, at the end of the day, to be able to go home feeling competent, feeling they've done something well. And that's massively important, because if you go home feeling that you've done something well, you're going to feel good inside. It's all right to have a little quiet pride in having done something well. I know pride's down as one of the deadly sins and all the rest of it. But if you go home feeling that that was okay, you know, you haven't let people down, you've done your bit, you've contributed, you've made stuff happen, that's a good feeling. And it's very powerful, because if the next morning you wake up not feeling 100% and it's a toss-up between a duvet day and a go-to-work day, if you've gone home feeling competent the day before, you're more likely to want to go to work the next day. So it's really important, really useful. On to the third area of the 4C model, the connection area. And this asks a number of questions about social connection, interaction. The first one, how much of the time do you have enough positive interaction and exchange of attention with colleagues? This is really important because we are a social animal. I think it's really interesting the way offices have changed over the last few years. Not very long ago, most freelancers and almost everybody who was employed full-time would have been in a place of their own. Freelancers beavering away in a spare bedroom, employees in an office with walls around it. Partly for financial reasons, you know, we went to open plan offices which have their own problems and all the rest of it. But I think it's really interesting that the most successful office spaces now seem to be very, very social places indeed. Almost every town has co-working spaces where there are open areas for discussion and chat. And you meet and talk to people you don't work with normally, you don't even know. Coffee bars where you can sit and discuss things. Desks that don't have walls between your company and another company, and so on. That's become more and more popular, and there must be a reason for that. And the reason is we're a social animal. That ability to have interaction with other people is hugely important, because it's very destabilizing if you can't do it. So we want to know, are people isolated, outworkers, lone workers, people who are in a team of one, people who are so busy they haven't got their time, they think they haven't got time to get their heads out of the screen. We want to know who those people are and talk to them and see what we can do to get them into just a little bit more of social interconnection, because it'll be good for them and it'll be good for their work performance as well. There's been this thing since the arrival of the typewriter, probably, or actually before that, the arrival of the scroll on the piece of parchment. There's been an assumption that you want your scribes to keep their heads firmly on their piece of papyrus and keep moving the ink pen up and down on it. And the same assumption has flowed through with the typewriter and now with the computer. And you expect to see people glued to the screen. Actually, it's very bad for them. Health and safety executive is very keen indeed that people should get screen breaks, but there are good psychological reasons, not just to do with your eyes and your mental focus and all the rest of it. There are multiple other psychological reasons why it's a good thing to get your head out of the screen periodically. How much of the time do you feel a sense of being part of something bigger than yourself, a common bond with other people, team spirit, those sort of ideas? That's the next question we ask. Because you need to know that as a manager. If people don't feel part of something bigger than themselves, then they won't be working particularly efficiently. They won't be collaborating to the degree that perhaps they could. And if you can understand why that's going on, then you can potentially do something about it. And then to that point that Zarina brought up earlier, how much of the time do you feel valued? I think this is the question that gets closest to that in all of this. How much of the time do you feel a sense of recognition and of having a status inside the organization? This is an attempt to get to whether people are being acknowledged for their contribution, because I was talking earlier on about reciprocity, the glue that holds almost all our social connections together is based on doing things for other people and having a sense that they're grateful for it. So then you want to do it again, and they will ask you to do things again, and you'll ask them to do things for you. And so we become more useful to each other, and we're just more likely to survive as a species. That need flows through us now as a need to be recognized for what we do. And you would be, well, maybe you wouldn't be actually astonished when you look at the results in WeThrive. You'll find that there are significant numbers of people in almost any team who do not feel properly appreciated for the work that they do. And there may be very simple ways around that. There may be very easy ways to sort that out through something as simple, as I said earlier, as realigning the way the newsletters work, or doing something like a social channel, or actually even getting people together in the same room, getting them to talk to each other about what's worked well. Sometimes, you know, old-fashioned ideas like that can work remarkably well too. Finally, the confidence area, the fourth C of the 4C model. Now, this is labeled as effects, and the first three were all labeled as causes. And that's because I don't think you can necessarily directly affect the degree to which people feel secure. You can't just say to somebody, feel more secure, would you? Thank you, that's better. It's not going to work. But what you can do is you can do something about their working conditions, or the knowledge that they have, or the recognition that they get, the acknowledgement that they've done the right things, and so on. And all of that will help build their sense of security that they're doing the right thing in the workplace. Or clearly, if it's a physical insecurity, then you need to do something about that directly too. But you can't just make people feel more secure. So these are downstream, these are effects. Everything else I've talked about before up to this point, those are things you can affect directly. And if you work with them, if you work with individuals to get them working better, then on the whole, people's sense of all of the stuff that we see in the effects area of the model here will improve as well. So how much of the time do people feel secure? I should have said earlier that the system asks 16 broad questions, and these are deliberately broad. Obviously, there are multiple different reasons, I've already said, why somebody might feel secure or not at work. But we ask the broad question first. And then if the score comes back low on that, then the system will go back and say to them, okay, on the occasions when you don't feel so secure at work, is it because you don't feel physically secure? Is it job security you're worried about? Is it financial? Is it to do with the knowledge that you have, that you don't think you quite know enough to be certain you're doing the right thing? Or is there something else? And then there'll be space in a free text box for people to put in more information about what is going on. And that is unbelievably useful to the line managers, because then they go into a meeting with people not only knowing what the problem is, how big the problem is, but where it's come from. And you already have something of the other people's side of the story about why it's an issue, and already thinking maybe about what could be done to make it work better. I should say that this also applies to the people who filled in the survey, of course, because in the process of exploring these effects of being at work, some of which may not be conscious, they'll already be starting to unpack in their own minds why these things are happening, and possibly already coming up with solutions that they could contribute to a discussion about how this area of work could be made to improve. So the second one in here, how much of the time do you feel a sense of autonomy and control? This is one of them, the big motivators in many motivational models. If people have the ability to decide how to do work. And now, not everybody, of course, given the ability to decide how to do things, will do them in a particularly efficient or useful way. They may try to recreate what they've done before, or they may have completely unusual ideas about how work should be done, which aren't particularly practicable or productive in the current environment. So not everything is necessarily going to work. Not everything can necessarily be fixed, but to the degree that we can nudge things in the right direction so people feel more of these things, then they will feel better and they'll work better and they'll get more done, they'll collaborate better and so on. How much of the time do people have adequate headspace? I said earlier on, people need to get their heads out of the screen, they need to get their eyes on the horizon, they need to see some sunshine, get some fresh air, because we are actually not machines, we're biological creatures. We grew up in the outside world, and while we have with the aid of vitamin D tablets, more or less adapted to being inside offices. It's not a natural environment, and we do periodically need to stop, integrate what we've learned over the last 90 minutes, have a little quiet, hazy time, and then we can come back on stream, focus properly, and tackle the next set of problems. And people who don't feel they have headspace won't be doing that. Next one's a catch-all. How much of the time are you sufficiently free from worry and anxiety? There may be other anxieties. We've covered the territory, believe me, pretty well. Everything that anybody could possibly be unhappy about has already been covered in the model, but you get the odd exceptions, and also people who are naturally anxious about things and who are worrying about things that you might not even thought would be causes of anxiety may well put in information in this area of the model, which is incredibly useful to you as their manager, because it allows you to build systems, processes, procedures, bits of reassurance that will work for those individuals, even though they might not necessarily have explained that they had a difficulty in that area. And then finally, how much of the time do you actually feel that work is meaningful? This is unbelievably important, obviously. If you think that your work is meaningful, then you're much more likely to do it willingly, much more likely to go into work in the mornings. One clear indication of that, of course, is that in the NHS, where the work is unbelievably meaningful, people go into health services because they want to help other human beings survive, which is an indication of how social we are and how much our reciprocity works. So they'll go and work in the NHS, and you'll see in the NHS very high scores on company and customers, or hospital and patients, as we might term it, because you can change all this terminology, and very high scores on meaning, even though everything else is actually, frankly, extremely difficult in many areas of the NHS. So those are the 16 broad questions that the 4C model asks. And what you do next as the manager is you will log into the system. You'll get a login that allows you to see, if I just go through some of the results, okay, you'll get a login that allows you to see something perhaps like this, that shows you how a team is scoring across the 16 areas of the model. And your first response to that might be, well, okay, what the heck am I seeing here? What do I do with all that? And I would say, don't panic, just stop for a moment, take a deep breath, have a look at each of the areas of the model, go back to the 4C model. You can find a lot of support material in the help files. If you've got a login to app.wethrive.net, you'll see there's the usual question mark icon up in the top right-hand corner. Inside there in the help files, there's everything that I've said this morning. There'll be a link to this webinar as well. And in there, you can see once again all the importance of all the individual areas of the model explained. And you'll see, looking at a team, perhaps a picture a little bit like this, where there are some areas where everybody's doing pretty well. The gray lines are the maximum and minimum that anybody in this team has scored, and the colored bars show the individuals, the average score, if you're looking at the team view, the average score for the team as a whole. So on this particular instance, on the skills item, which is the second orange bar, you'll see everybody's pretty close together. Nobody's scored particularly low. The mean is pretty close to the maximum and minimum, so the whole team feel okay about that. There are no obvious skill gaps in here. But if you look at the team understanding bar, that's the third red one, then at least one person doesn't feel the team really have the same picture in their heads, because only 40% of the time does that individual think that they have a shared picture. So you start like that. Take a look at each area and say, right, okay, where are the common themes? What are the things that we can say are definitely common to the whole group? Personal performance is one, skills is another, that's pretty good too. We don't need to worry about that. That's fine. Even if it's low and the maximum, minimum, mean are all the same, then that's probably something that is going to be covered by a whole team approach, or possibly by a whole organization approach, because the people who've got the view of the whole organization will be making strategic plans as well. And then you have to say, right, okay, where are the big opportunities here? What can I actually do that's going to make a difference to this group? Now, look, there's clearly disagreement over how much the time they have, the resources that they need. A lot of people aren't going home feeling particularly competent, though some are. There's clearly a communications possibility because the team understanding and team cooperation bars are lower than the personal performance bar, and so on. So you just work through it gently, bit by bit, and put that together with the context that you have, because obviously the system has an overview of what's going on inside a team, but it doesn't know the context. You know the context, and you know the individuals involved, and you say to yourself, right, okay, where's the quick one in here? Because what we want to do first of all as a line manager working with a group who've just done a survey is to validate their input, thank them, acknowledge the fact that they've taken part, and give them something back. Because of that need for reciprocity, we want to give them something in return for having taken part. The first thing has to be to say thank you. Thank you for taking part. We hope that as a line manager, you'll have modeled the behavior you want the team to show by filling in your own survey as early as possible, telling other people you've done it, asking them to do it, checking that your team are doing it, and so on and so on and so on. Thank you as soon as the survey is closed. We hope that the organization will generate a high-level summary of results that everybody will get, and then you'll sit down with your team as soon as possible and say, thank you again for taking part. Some obvious themes have come out of this. We can see that there's some work to be done around communications. There might be something we need to do about resourcing and acknowledging the way people have worked, because the acknowledgement and the competence bars are not particularly good in here. And so you give the people the idea that they've contributed something. Out of it has come an increased understanding of what their work experience is like and what they need in order to be able to be happy and work well. And that's an amazing start. And then you'll be sitting down with either individuals, if you're using the individual level of this product, individual version of this product, which allows you to see right down to individual scores, or you'll be sitting down with teams and you'll be working through those areas for improvement and coming up with solutions collaboratively, involving people, I hope, getting them to contribute ideas, thanking them where they've contributed useful ideas, getting people to collaborate and so on, because that ultimately is what we want everybody to be able to do as part of being in a workplace anyway. There's a lot more to be said about how WeThrive works, a great deal more. There's a lot more in the system than we've got time to go through this morning. The resources that are available, the action plans that are available for line managers, the resources that are available to help them work through the issues that have come up, all of that is something that would be lovely to be able to explain. We just don't have time today. Here's a very brief example of the next thing the system does. If you have WeCoach, which is to explain more about each problem that's come up, how big a problem it is, how many people are experiencing it. And then from there, you can create actions in the WeDo action tracking system. And you can click through to the contextual resources, because we've got a big library of really useful resources, some of them videos, some worksheets, classroom activities, things that line managers can do in order to make good use of the information that's come out to help people have a better time, just to contribute to a cycle. We hope every organization will treat this as an opportunity, not just once a year to learn how people are, but on a regular basis, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, as part of a continual cycle of learning, to understand what issues have come up, who they affect, why they affect them, and bring in additional information from WeThrive that gives you insight into the underlying causes, and get everybody together to talk about it, give them the resources they need to develop collaborative solutions so that everybody starts to feel more empowered to make their own time at work better. And line managers out of that get a greater sense of satisfaction in the job. Not everybody really wants to be a line manager, it has to be said. You know, a large number of people who have management responsibilities, people management responsibilities, really wanted to do something else, or very good at something else. But because they're very good at something else, as part of their seniority, they get line management responsibilities as well. And this is a really good way to develop the practice of understanding what people need and helping them find that, so that they find work a more satisfying and productive place to be. That's enough for today. As I say, we could talk for days, and I sometimes do. There are multiple other sources of information about WeThrive. The help files in the app, which you'll get a login to if you're a line manager with responsibility for implementing the results from WeThrive in all probability. But you can actually get to the help files even if you don't have a login, if you're just working on a plan generated by your own L&D or HR department. There are a lot of resources on our other site, on WeThrive.net. There's blogs and white papers and a massive material related to the concerns of the line manager. So please do go in there, have a look around, tell us what you find useful, tell us what there isn't in there that you would find useful, because we're always keen to do whatever we can to get more material into the public domain that will make line management an easier job, because it isn't always an easy job. And the whole purpose of WeThrive is to make it a little easier for you. So thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. It's been a great pleasure. I hope we've been able to do something very useful, or even slightly useful would be good. As I say, get in touch if there's anything else you'd like, and I'm sure we will meet again.